Do you know what's happening tomorrow? Are you aware of our festivities going down this weekend in our city? I mentioned Billy Idol and T-Pain.
I mean, that's a big deal. You're going to have a hard time
don't know.
topping that.
Well, if you're not T-Paining on these hoes.
Hootie's at the amphitheater tonight.
Hootie's at the Amp? What is happening in our state this weekend,
want to be with you.
I know.
What are we doing here, man?
Is the Blowfish with him?
Yeah, that's Hootie and the Blowfish, Collective Soul, and Edwin McCain.
Sounds like a nice show.
Collective Soul had some hits back in the day.
Yeah, so that's going on. The Waterfront concert's going on. We have a sporting event in our city at the Moda Center happening. And it's rekindling an old love, an old flame.
Is the Big Three rolling through town?
Yay!
The Big Three's in Portland this weekend?
Big Three is in Portland, Oregon, USA. And I didn't know this until about a couple months back. I don't know if it just happened. Clyde Drexler is the commissioner of that league.
Now, does he travel city to city as the commissioner?
And Clyde the Glide is back in Portland. And it was interesting because I don't follow his son, but his son is quite active on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he loves to just poke and needle at Blazer fan of, why you love my dad more? My dad is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you. You don't know my dad like I know my dad. And he loves to tell us how stupid we are as sports fans all the time, it feels like.
There's a constant beef going on between Blazer fans and Adam Drexler.
But it's just interesting to think. Dame is gone. He's been gone for over a year. I don't know if I'm sure that changed the math on the greatest Blazer stuff for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because we always cited like the fact that he was so committed to us.
He was loyal and he wanted to be here.
It's so weird to think about Clyde and Portland. And I think most people in the room are adults, mature, happy and grateful for what they saw in Clyde's run. But the small noise is so loud that it makes it feel like the relationship is very frosty and weird. And so he's going to be back. Our one-time lover and husband is back in town post the divorce. And we don't see him often, but if you go to the big league or the Big Three game, you'll probably see Clyde Drexler.
See him walking around. I actually stumbled on some Big Three last weekend. It's funny you bring it up because I was watching the final round of the Scottish Open, which was on early because it was, over the pond. And it was on CBS, and the tournament ended, and all of a sudden I'm just still on CBS, and I'm like, what is, they're interviewing Gary Payton. Brian Scalabrini's interviewing Gary Payton, who was a coach in the Big Three, and Corey Brewer's torching somebody, and this is what Big Three basketball looks like.
Al Jefferson's in that league.
I had never watched it before, so that was my first introduction into the league of it's half-court ball, and there's a 4-point line, and all right, I think it stayed on my TV for about an hour because I was walking around, and I was too lazy to change the channel, and there was nothing else actually on. I think this has been mainly the fault of one side over the years. Like when you're the guy that wants out, and Clyde wanted out in the mid-'90s, and I can't really blame him at that point. We
kind of had forced his hand at that
He was
point,
floundering.
yeah.
It was very similar to the end of the Dame era of like, all right, we're not trying much anymore. I want to have a chance to win and get me out of here. I think if you want the relationship to be rosy and nice with the city that you demanded out from, there needs to be an effort on your side. And that's why it's always been unique to me, because I'm not quite old enough to remember all the Clyde days. I remember the very end of it, and then him winning championships in Houston. One championship in Houston. But if you come back and you're part of the city and you're doing interviews and you're doing appearances and you're a part of, the day-to-day life, not every day, but you get my larger point. I think eventually fences come down, relationships are mended, and you remember the good times. That's just never been the way that it is with him. And I think that's one of the main reasons that all these years later, there's still kind of a weird, awkward, frosty relationship there.
It's weird because he I don't know if he still calls play-by-play for the Rockets, but he's been on that broadcast for a long time, and he's doing the media thing. He just doesn't do a lot of media.
No.
He's very guarded in that way. There are a couple old scribes in our city that have relationships with him because they covered him, but like outside of those people, nothing. And I don't if somebody's not comfortable talking to the media, like that's fine, but I think again, the noise is small, but it's loud. And so it's like, well, Clyde he does not fully embrace much of the Portland stuff. It's he's a Houston guy, so I get that. Yeah. But I think the mixture of not talking to media much, I haven't really seen a whole big effort on the Trailblazers side. Not that they need to of the Clyde stuff. I think they would do anything if Clyde asked for it.
And maybe they are behind the scenes, and he's turning them down and saying, no, I don't care, and I don't want to do it.
He's always publicly, though, very cordial about his time here.
But see, I think if we saw him, you would say thank you, and he would say, yeah, absolutely, I loved being here. I think that's really what it is.
His beef was, it was contractual.
Management.
With, at the time, he was trying to get one more big contract, and he was in a time where the first transition was going on from, he wasn't all that far from being around when the first $1 million per year contract was given, and then MJ came in, and then we started to see the exponential rise of contracts and those sorts of things, and he was trying to make sure he got one, and Portland really wasn't interested in giving one.
Yeah, at that point in his career.
We gave him the chances, and we came up short against the Pistons and the Bulls, and then it was a pivot out into a new era of Blazer basketball. It's just interesting. He's back in town.
Yeah,
he doesn't do a lot of Portland things.
I don't think he has anything bad to say about the city in general or fans.
No, I don't either, which is why I think sometimes, whether the guy would admit it or not, I feel like his kid kind of railroads feelings for people on some of that stuff because of what he says and how he makes it sound like Blazer fan hates Clyde or doesn't value him enough. So he's not everybody's GOAT. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that was boiling over in the Dame eras when a lot of people would make the argument Dame's the greatest Blazer of all time.
Definitely.
And then it led to this back and forth, which was always, it's just a difference of opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. It's a ridiculous made up proposition anyways that we can never prove. But I was thinking about this earlier this offseason because it was very similar, I thought, with the way Bill Walton left and then the way eventually as time went on, he became reconnected to the city, but they had a very similar icy relationship when he left. I remember we had Holdall on to react to his passing away, and he said a line about Bill Walton coming back years later, 20, 30 years later after being gone from Portland, and apologizing to the fans and always feeling like he let the city down. And it's just, you never quite know what's going on inside these guys' heads and why they feel certain ways. But when he left, he did not have a good relationship with the organization, and he didn't have much to do with Portland for a very long time, and eventually mended those fences and was back and did all the anniversaries of 1977 and that.
Yeah.
This will always be the unique thing about Lillard is that even still now in the offseason, he's here. This is where he's working out. Yeah. When he retires, where do we think he's going to be a part of the community? This is going to be his home base.
Yeah. And there's quotes attributed or stories attributed. He still wants to come back and finish his career in Portland.
And we won't be shocked at all if his last season
sign a 2-year deal, vet minimum, whatever. When he's
a league minimum 1 year, where he's literally not playing, and we give him the ovation. But
come back for a year. But it's one of the unique things about him that it will never take away from the player that Clyde was. No. I just think there was always a more passionate love affair with the guy because he embraced us. And we're a city that doesn't often get embraced, especially in that league. Yeah. And when you have that connection and a guy who truly wants to be here and wanted to win here and never had anything bad to say and still lives here, it will resonate more.
National pundits pick up that Blazer conversation. Like I've heard Simmons talk about it, I've heard Nick Wright talk about it, and they always scoff at the notion that it's not Clyde and Walton, and their perspective is like, he's not even the best player to ever play, and that Clyde was this and Walton was that. And it's like, no, it's not always for organizations, especially in a weird city like Portland. It's not always about all NBAs, titles, MVPs. We're one of the unique cities in that it's our major pro sports team. Passion and connection are weird, right? So Bill was the driving force of the 77 team, and it ended way too quickly with the injuries.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I think Dame resonates for so many, whether it's our age demographic or younger, and Clyde might not as much, is because the unique thing about those Clyde's teams are we all knew he was the best player. He wasn't always the favorite.
No, you could name
Jerome,
four different guys.
Terry
TP,
Porter,
Duckworth,
Buck, Cliff.
Cliff. There's 5-6 guys on that team that they weren't the best player, and we all knew it.
Sure.
But they became our favorite. How many times for a great team does the city not pick the best player as the favorite player?
Yeah, that never happened in Dame's era. The second he
Not
got
a
here, he
second.
was the favorite player, and that's part of the reason LaMarcus left right away.
And so it's like you ask my brother-in-law, and his favorite is TP.
Yeah.
You ask
Mine is Cliffy's my favorite Blazer of all time.
You ask other people, it's Jerome.
Yeah.
And part of that is really kind of just being involved in the city, and just for whatever reason, it's just sometimes some of these guys' personalities aren't built the way that some of the others are. And so, Clyde goes to Houston, he's post-Houston everything, and that's okay. But I think that's part of the conversation on that topic here in Portland. And it's just interesting. He's back in town, the Big Three. I'm not going to go to it.
Yeah, going to the Big Three this weekend?
I couldn't care less
Come
about Big Three basketball.
on.
I saw Al Jefferson play at the best. I don't need to watch him at his worst. But if you go to it, it's hoops. I get it. It's
Say hi
former
to
NBA
Clyde,
players.
man.
Say hi to Clyde.
Yeah.